Welcome to Wealthy Mind, where we talk about all things finances, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the surprising. Welcome to Wealthy Mind. I am your host, Misty Rose Gold, International Success Coach. Today I have with me Phil Better. Hi, Phil.
Hello, Misty. I'm so happy to be here.
I am so excited to have this conversation with you, like uber excited, because we're going to talk about monetizing podcasts. Like, hello, who can't learn from that, especially me?
Yeah, it's a little niche that I've created for myself. I
hmm
love been in the podcasting space for over a decade now, and I just love helping people make money from this passion that I have.
Yes. So we are calling you the podcast mogul. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What a great
I
title.
no one was using it, so I said, "Hey, let's pick it up." Kind of what the Scots did for when the what's left for the flowers, a thistle. We'll go with a thistle, and we'll take a unicorn. No one's using it. Might as well use it. That's my motto in life.
Heck yeah. Love it. So, what caused you to call yourself the mogul other than it's not being used, the podcast mogul? Like, how did you step into that?
To be very fair, it was actually one of my clients who suggested I have a title, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we're just shooting the space, and he came up with it because he was just shooting ideas for his podcast, and I was coming up with different, like, okay, we can do this, and then he's like, okay, what about a podcast about this? I'm like, we can do this and this, and just laying out like, okay, this is how we launch, this is how we grow it, and this is how we monetize it. And each one he was giving, he's like, dude, are these podcasts already? I'm like, no, this is just what I'm working with. He's like, you're on like a mogul thinking level. Like, you think
Mm-hmm.
beyond just like, okay, here's a podcast, great. You're like, okay, how can we turn this into a business? How can we make it into a bigger than what it is?
Mm-hmm.
And so he's like, you're like a mogul, man. I'm like the podcast mogul. And he's like, that's it. That's your title. That's what you're going with. And since then, like since 2020, I've been the podcast mogul.
Well, it definitely attracted me, so I like it.
There we go. It works, right? You're
Yes.
like, who are you having on your podcast? The podcast mogul. Who's the podcast mogul? He talks nothing but podcasts and everything podcasts. Like,
Uh-huh.
if you have a podcast, that's who you want on your podcast, right? Because
Yeah.
everybody's looking to monetize or finding additional ways to monetize, because this
Mm-hmm.
space is very difficult to monetize because we don't have direct numbers that are displayed to the
Mm.
universe, right? Like, if you go on YouTube, yeah, you can see a subscriber count. If you go to Instagram, you see a follower count. TikTok, all those have publicly displayed numbers.
Uh-huh.
But podcast, we don't.
Right.
You have Apple and Spotify are the two biggest, and you have Amazon coming up, but they don't display how many users or listeners or downloads or anything like that to the public. So you
Mm-hmm.
have no idea. I have people going, oh, you must know the XYZ. They have a huge podcast. Well, a huge podcast to you, it could be a small podcast to me,
Right.
because I'm not in that niche. I'm not in that zone. Like, it's like TikTok. You have different versions of TikTok. You have book talk, you have entrepreneur talk, you have, social warrior talk, and you have silly talk, man talk, woman talk, stripper talk. You have all these different versions of TikTok that people can fall because of the algorithm. And it's the same thing with podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
You just have so many different podcasts. Like, Apple says there's about 4 million podcasts on their platform, I would say. And being in this space, the turnover is very high. 97% of people who start a podcast fail because they
Mm.
don't even get past 10 episodes. They just fail because they think, as simple as a podcast is, this is the simple part of a podcast, just chatting.
Well, this
Me,
is the easy part.
this is like the easy breezy beautiful. This is what everybody thinks a podcast is, but they don't realize Afterwards, you have the editing, the copywriting, the, reaching out to guests, getting guests to share, because that's the biggest thing, getting guests
Mm-hmm.
who are actively on your podcast, sharing the podcast episode with their audience so that it can grow.
Mm-hmm.
No one actually thinks about that because they think, oh, I'm listening to this podcast and it must be huge because I'm listening to it, right?
Okay, who has the muscle car?
Sorry, it was just a motorcycle that just passed
Oh,
by.
okay.
I'm in a suburban place. I'm sorry. And if I close the windows, it becomes a sauna in here. So I have to have one window open. But
Got it, got it.
I'll go back to what I was saying before we had Mr. Harley Davidson.
Uh-huh.
A lot of people think because someone is listening to a podcast that it's huge,
Right,
but it could be still small. It could have like 100 listeners.
right.
But the host acts like they have a podcast that is listened to billions of people.
I think I fall in that category.
Hey, everybody
I
should believe
don't.
that they have a billion listeners. That's what I say. You're a podcaster, you have a billion listeners because there are a billion people like you, exactly like you, Misty. Like if you look, there's 8 billion people in the world. If you bring eight
Mm-hmm.
people together, they will represent at least a billion people. It could be the color of the skin, the religion, their hobby, if they will, their job. There's something that you will connect with on a billion people. So
Mm-hmm.
if you believe that you have a billion listeners as a podcaster, you get out of this mind frame of, oh, I have to build something and I already
Right.
have the listeners. Now I need to bring the quality and the value to my listeners
Mm-hmm.
so that they will enjoy. So those billions of people who are listening to my podcast will enjoy that content and will make it simpler for me to monetize.
Mm,
And
I love that.
once you figure out that it's simple. Everything in podcasting is simple. It's a lot of work,
It
but it's
is a lot
hard
of
work.
work.
It's hard work as well, but it's simple because recording a podcast is simple. Promoting a podcast is simple. You pick one platform, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, whichever one you want to be your home, and you tell everybody to go to that platform. Now you
Mm-hmm.
know they're going to that platform. Spotify, those platforms are like, oh, something's up with this podcast. We need to promote it more. They're going to do their job promoting it. All you're doing is telling people who aren't on that platform to go to that platform, and the platform will take care of the rest. Cool. That's taking care of promotion, right?
So
Monetizing. Go ahead.
let's repeat that again because this is a very important point that I did not know until you and I spoke because I know that Wealthy Mind is on 67 platforms.
Which is
And
super important. You be on as many platforms as you want, but it's just like social media. If you're building your social media following,
mhm,
you don't do it on all the platforms. You start with one platform and
mhm,
then move them to the other social media platforms. Well, with podcasting, there's not many other platforms, so it's not that bad. It's not that hard. But you want to start with one of the platforms so that you can get a base. And because
mm,
once the base is done, the platform will help you. So Spotify goes, look, we have 3,000 people subscribed to this podcast and they're returning. Their listen through rate is huge.
mhm,
Episodes are getting downloads out the wazoo from those 3,000 people. We're going to start putting it into our search, our home category now. So people who are kind of listening to somewhat similar, they have a similar profile as the listeners, will enjoy this podcast. Now you're getting the platform, Spotify, to do most of the heavy lifting for you because now they're going to they're going to show it to their audience, and if their audience starts listening to it, they're like,
mhm,
okay, we have another person who likes it, we're going to share it to more people. So go from 100 people that already don't follow your podcast to 100 people that do follow your podcast, and they're going to show it to another 100 and another 100, and it's just going to grow, and you now don't have to do much work. You just
mhm,
have to do, if my social media outwards or people coming into my funnel as my business, I have to
mhm,
get them to listen to my podcast. Because if they listen to my podcast, now they're going to hit those 7 points of interest, points of contact that business
mhm,
people know when you're marketing that the person needs to have before they fall in truly in love with you or they trust you out completely. So
mm,
by moving them towards your podcast, you're allowing them to have access to you. If you're doing a daily podcast, a weekly podcast, monthly podcast, whatever your thing you're podcasting out is, but you have 7 episodes, people can listen to those 7 and they're going to trust you more. And
mhm,
then they're continually listening and they're going to be like, this person knows what they're talking about. So either I'm going to hire them to do the service that they offer. So let's say they it's lawn care, and this in the episode the guy just talks, or the individual talks about how everyday homeowners can do simple things to keep their lawn green, right? Or weed free or whatever it is. But then at the end of the episode, if you don't want to do that, you can always hire the weed killer, Mike the weed,
Sure.
right? Or
Sure.
whatever. You put an ad for your business. That's the simplest way to monetize your podcast. You do a
Mm,
podcast where you teach people solo episodes or interview episodes. And at the end, you offer your services to the
mm,
listener. And the listener is going to be like, yes or no. And why am I, it's advertising that other companies want to pay for your audience, right?
right.
Why not just make be that your business is now advertising to your demographic that you want to have on your to be your client. That's the simplest
Mhm.
way. Like, you grow a podcast, you could put out great content, you make sure that your email sequence from your business is funneling people to the episodes, you make sure it's prominent on your website. When you're going out talking to clients or potential clients, like, you know what, if you don't want to sign with me today, that's great, I'm
Mhm.
okay with that. However, I think you should listen to this podcast. It's my podcast.
Mhm.
It gives away great information on how XYZ, or it will solve some of your problems. I think you should give it a listen. And they'll
Mhm.
listen to it and they'll be like, you know what? I feel more comfortable working with this person. I'll buy their product, their services, their book, whatever you have on sale.
Sure.
That is probably the smartest and fastest way to start building your brand and your business, is by funneling people to listen to your podcast.
Love
Because
it.
the podcast also is going to bring you opportunities. People are going to reach out and go, hey, you have this amazing podcast, I want to talk to you.
Mhm.
Just like for me, a lot of people are like, yeah, I want to talk to the Podcast Mogul. Well, why am I the mogul? Well, I have a lot of podcasts that I produce. I know how to monetize podcasts. I I enjoy this space. This space is my home.
Mhm.
If I didn't find podcasting, I'd probably still be working a corporate job and hating my life. But now I get to talk with people who are making
Yeah.
Ubers and lots of more money than me,
Mhm.
but are willing to share their secrets so that others can join them in that freedom. And yeah, and you that is like I said, monetizing a podcast, you have like 4 or 5 different ways you can monetize. Sell your advertising. So
Mhm.
either you're selling your own advertising or you're getting other people to pay you for advertising on your space. So Misty, if you're like, I want to show wealthy, here's $50, advertise on your business. You have affiliate marketing, which is like, hey, this Amazon product I'm using,
Mhm.
you should use it too. The link's in the bio. Buy it and I get paid by Amazon or Nike or Adidas or,
Mhm.
Lamborghini. I don't know if Lamborghini has an affiliate, but if they do, and you're a car podcast, you should be on it.
Mhm.
You sell your services directly to your guests. Now, this is one where you interview your ideal client that you want, and
Mhm.
you interview them, and then at the end of the episode, you say, hey, yo, I do, like, for me, I do podcasting, production for high net worth individuals, specifically video. I take care of the technical aspects, and all you have to do is record the content. And people are like, you know what, I want a podcast. As you know, Misty, how intensive it is to run a podcast.
Yes, I
It's
do.
a lot of work, right? But if I told you,
Yes.
like, you can have like you have someone that helps you out running it, right?
Mhm.
So you just get to
Yep.
record the content, and then you're like, yay, and I'll do the promoting of it, right? I'll talk to the
Well,
people.
it's not that cut and dry with me and Trifon. So Trifon takes care of the technology, the back end of it. I do all the finding of the people.
It's a
I,
split of the work. Like, if you had
right.
to do everything, you would be.
Yeah. I couldn't do it. If I had to do it all by myself, I couldn't do it. And that is honest and true. So I am so grateful for Trifon because he's amazing and I love him. Uh, and it's a great pairing because he doesn't want to be in front of people, but I do. And he loves technology. That's his jam. So we make a great partnership in that space. But a lot of people don't understand what goes into just collecting the people to interview and the technology that is required to keep that organized is insane.
Yeah,
So just that part alone, keeping everybody organized, keeping everybody on schedule and all the things, it's like mind blowing. Some days I'm like, how do I even sleep? This is awesome, great, wonderful. But there's that that goes into it. There's the nurturing of the podcast. So I network a lot in person and I nurture the podcast that way. I'm an empire builder. So I built my coaching empire and continuing to do that. And I help others build their empires. And this is a piece of my empire, right?
Mhm.
It's strategically placed. So I use it as a tool to then gain more awareness and spread the credibility. And the more that happens, the more listeners I get, which is awesome and amazing and wonderful. It's just this beautiful cycle that happens. And of course, at the end of each episode in the outro, we guide everyone to our Wealthy Mind app. And that's a monetized piece, right? There's a part of it that is free for everyone to use, and then there's a part of it that is under subscription, which is very minimal. It's like $7.99 a month. So that's permanently embedded in the outro.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
Again, it's you're selling the service
Hmm.
that you want. You can, and when I say it's like monetize your service, it could be a book. It's sometimes a low end, low ticket price item,
Uh-huh.
like the Wealthy Mind app. You know,
Hmm.
for 7.99. That's for some people, 7.99 is nothing,
Right.
and but they're already saying yes to buying something from you. So
Mm-hmm.
they're already in the habit of buying. So if they're willing to put 7.99
Mm-hmm.
down for you, you'll be able to charge them $7,000. It's
Sure.
it's it's in that funnel because they're already saying yes to you. They're on that yes
Hmm.
ladder,
Hmm.
right? And even if it's a small commitment, 7.99, that small commitment, they'll start gaining more trust in you. They'll start learning more
Hmm.
about you, and then there's going to be an offer that you're going to be down the road that they're going to jive with. They're going to be like,
Right.
this is my offer. They say yes. Now you move them from 7.99 to 199, let's just say, like if you can do that jump, great. If you can't, whatever. But then they're up to a next level and they're in this different mindset where they're already used to paying you more. So when you
Hmm.
come with that $7,000 offer, they're more likely, if they're able to have that capital, they're more likely to say yes because they've already said yes before.
Love it.
Getting someone,
You're definitely bringing up Russell Brunson's Expert Secrets book.
I don't want to say that I may have read a couple of Brunson's books or gone through his webinars, but
Yeah,
this,
same, same. I know the lingo quite well. I'm like, dude, I know your language.
but what's really funny is this concept of the yes ladder
Hmm.
is something that I read about in Robert Cialdini's Influence.
Oh, okay. All right.
So going back even further
Nice.
about this, and it's something that I was like, oh my God, I never knew. And I was reading that book at a different stage in my life when I was not in business, but I was just social interacting.
Hmm.
And I was using the yes ladder to get dates in bars,
Nice.
right? Because it's a business concept that works. It's a sociological concept, right? Psychology.
It's a relationship concept.
It
Yes.
is.
Yes.
We're building a relationship. One relationship is, hey, friendship or more. The other is business. And when I saw Russell bring it in, I'm like, I studied psychology like when I was younger, right? I was reading
Mhm.
psychology books to understand how to increase my social dynamics. And I'm like, a lot of it is business too. Oh my God, I didn't realize. So seeing that meld of social and psychology and business all together,
Hmm.
um, and seeing how Russell was able to use it to make that ladder, the yes ladder, and bring it into my own business, I was like, oh my
Hmm.
God, you're steps ahead. That's one reason why I believe in investing in yourself. Like that's the
Oh
reason why
yeah.
I called it my podcast, my network is called that, is because reading is fundamentally the best piece of investment you can make because it will pay dividends
Hmm.
in the long run. Interviewing
Yes.
people, getting, like you said, you have that networking group. That is an amazing investment in yourself. If you
Hmm.
like, for people who can't afford it but can afford a book, buy books and learn as much as you can because those
Right.
books will teach you because it's a master class. If you have the money to go to the networking groups, go to those networking groups because you're going to find someone there that either will hire you for the skills that you have or be able to point you in the right direction and become a
Hmm.
mentor for you.
Yes.
And all those lead to monetizing your skills. It literally all I'm doing is monetizing my skills as a podcaster
Hmm.
to monetize podcasts because the exact ways I'm monetizing podcasts is the same way a business can monetize their business. Referrals, affiliate
Hmm.
marketing is referral
Hmm.
marketing.
Right.
Selling your service is selling your service. A
Hmm.
business needs to advertise, you can advertise on your podcast. That's your media. Your podcast is your TV show, your radio show. Why not, right? They do it on radio all the time. Why not? um, selling to your guest, right? That is, a sales call.
Hmm.
It's the exact same thing as a business sales call, except here you're getting, in fact, you're getting resources, and you can ask those questions in a sales like environment where it's an interview. Person's going to be a little less on guard for sales, so
Hmm.
you're getting to learn them, and you can verify. You're, in essence, you're qualifying this client. Will this person be a good fit for my business? Yes or no?
Hmm.
And then they get to trust you because they don't feel like they're being sold to. Then
Hmm.
afterwards they're more engaged because they got to talk with you, and you can say, hey, you know what, I have this service if ever you're interested.
Yes.
And
It's a great tool to vet clients. Podcasting is, I love
oh,
it. So you mentioned something about reading. It's one of the most valuable tools that we have in our tool belt. And I read Russell's book eons ago, his Expert Secrets book, and it stays with me to this day. And I share his secrets with my clients, and they're blown away by it. I'm like, go read the book. So I do it in my speaking too. In my speaking engagements, I wrap in how can I get people to say yes? And it can be something as simple as, have you ever experienced stress? Yes. Right?
yeah.
Have you ever experienced anger? Just simple things like that. It's not complicated. You don't have to have this complicated, grandiose way of getting people to say yes to. It's a simple question.
And each yes builds upon the previous one. So when you start getting to those more harder yes questions, the sales questions, or
Hmm.
commitment
Hmm.
questions, because you've built up, like you said, have you ever felt anger? Have you ever felt isolation? Have you ever felt stressed? Those small little yeses, because those are easy yeses they get. They're not,
Hmm.
everybody's felt this, everybody's felt that. So already they're in that mindset of saying yes to you, and you built up multiple yeses.
Hmm.
Now you're coming to the ask. Now the ask is going to be a bit easier to get the yes from, instead of them going no. Because if you start off with the ask, the no is very strong. But when
Right.
you do those small little yeses throughout, they're already saying yes to you. You're conditioning them to say yes. So the
Hmm.
no starts getting smaller and smaller. It's always there because it's like, oh, it's $12,000. I only have five. So there's a possibility of a no. However, if there's ways around those type of things, but you
Sure.
want to build up those yeses.
Hmm.
You want to build up that small little yes ladder to the point where they're feeling more at ease saying yes to the monetary amount. Um, and again, I always say this, like, most of my knowledge has not come from me, it's come from other people. I will tell you, like, hey, this style of monetization, Russell taught. I learned from Russell, or deconstructing what Russell does.
Right.
This method of monetization I learned from an actual guest on my podcast, because they
Hmm.
mentioned it, and I'm like, oh,
Hmm.
cool, I can do that for podcasting as well. And it's doing that, you up level your skills. I always look at how I can make money for people.
Mm.
That's what I love. That's my skill. I love money and I love helping people. Let's put those two together of how can I help people make more money? And
Awesome.
I know podcasting is the number one way, because I've already helped someone become a 2 comma club winner, like
Oh, nice.
of Russell Brunson. Like, with
Yeah.
adding the podcast to his funnel, it aided in moving people down, and now he has a multi that one funnel is a multi-comma club
Love
funnel.
it. Love it.
And he's won an award for it. Like, he's not only won an award the 2 comma club, but he's won an award for his podcast as well, as the best business podcast and marketing. So he is using this podcast to leverage who he is, and he's been able to connect with some amazing individuals, like the co-writer of Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Oh, yeah, sure. Uh-huh.
I can't remember her name off the top of it, but she's created the game as well, the Rich Dad Poor Dad board game, and she's part of Robert Kiyosaki's inner circle. So it's like,
Hmm.
already we got one step closer to getting Robert Kiyosaki on the podcast by
Sure.
interviewing this other person, but also lends the credibility to
That's
them.
the piece, the
The big
credibility
that
piece.
credibility is like, he already has huge credibility about from what he's done in his personal life through business and that.
Hmm.
But with the podcast, it just adds to this another level, because you can say, hey, I can show you that I have 3,000 followers on Spotify. Not a lot of podcasters are going to tell you how many followers they have on Spotify or on Apple, right? They're scared.
I
They don't
can't tell
understand.
you how many we have because we're on 67 platforms and I'm not in control of that. Like we have the access to 10 platforms to check, but I don't have access to check all the others.
Yeah. Well, that's why we host specifically on Spotify, so that's why I have
Hmm.
that detail, that intrinsic detail. But depending on where you host, you may or may not get that information. So the only reason I know is because I'm on Spot. We host it on Spotify. Um, but also we push out to push all his listeners to go to Spotify because it is what dominates the market.
Hmm.
Not everybody has an iPhone, right? North America, it's iPhone. Fully accept that North America is an iPhone, is
Sure.
the iPhone capital. But if you go to Europe, Android is actually the capital.
Hmm.
So if you're pushing people to Apple iTunes, yeah, you're getting most of North America and a few outsiders.
Hmm.
But if you push to Spotify, now I'm covering the world. And I'd rather cover
Okay.
the world than just North America.
Love it. I love that. That makes so much sense because I'm very strategic in everything that I do. So let's work smart, not hard. Now, on my website, I feature our podcast with iHeartRadio because I have the personal connection with them.
Mhm.
And I know that they're not Apple or Android specific. So
That's even
there,
better.
yeah, there's another option. And because of our contact or my contact at iHeartRadio, they put us on the additional 57 platforms. And that was an incredible day. I was crying, of course.
That's
So,
incredible, getting a platform to do the work to get you onto those other platforms
mm,
is huge. Because one, as podcast geeks like myself, we may not use Spotify or Apple or Amazon. We may
mhm,
like that Pocket Cast or the other smaller versions that are out there because it's independent, right? I don't have to, I'm not giving it to the corporate overlords, if you will. For some people may feel like that.
mhm.
So being on multiple platforms is great. Never not getting on your website, put it to where you want. If it allows you to embed the podcast on your website because of the hosting platform, great, do it. I'm not against all that. Do what you can to maximize.
Mhm.
My experience, if you're looking to get the biggest bang for your buck, send them to Spotify because then you have a chance that everybody listens when
Okay.
you're on your podcast. However, on your website, put whatever you want,
Sure.
right? Because that's another domain that they may not be listening to you. So if they
Mm,
fall onto your website, they're like, oh, iHeartRadio, boom, start listening to it. They'll listen to iHeartRadio. They'll hear that you're on Spotify as well, and they may transfer over to Spotify, or they may
mhm.
be like, you know what, I prefer the display of iHeartRadio, and they stay with iHeartRadio. I I I the only thing I am saying is send them to one location to listen to your
Sure.
podcast
Sure.
so that it's easier for you to provide data when you want to go out and get sponsors. If you're looking to sponsor your podcast, they want those numbers. And if you can say,
Mhm.
hey, Spotify distinctly we have this many followers on it, they'll be like, oh, instead of saying across 67 platforms, we have 3,000 followers. That doesn't break down numbers nicely. But if
Right.
you say, I have distinctly on Spotify 6,000 followers or 3,000 followers,
Mm,
people are going to peek up to that. They're like, oh, are you only on that? No, we're on other platforms, but our main platform is this. Then they're like, okay, if he has 3,000 on that, what are the numbers like on the other platforms?
right. I
So
have a
they're going
question.
to shoot. I've been
So,
talking your ear off, so I love answering questions.
no, I love it. And I understand some of this and I love hearing new information. And I'm all about a one bullseye. This is what I teach my clients. Let's figure out what that one bullseye is and channel all of our energy and effort into that one bullseye. So we have had issues with Spotify not being able to find our podcast. Whenever I'm like, hey, yeah, check it out on Spotify, and people are like, I can't find it by typing in your name or Wealthy Mind's name. And I'm like, okay, there's an issue there. How do we solve that issue?
At that point, what I would do is I would go to what's called Spotify for Podcasters, and it's their homepage for all podcasters
Mm,
that have their podcasts on Apple. You can go and claim your podcast. Once you've claimed your podcast, you should be able to see some of the information that the Spotify has on your podcast and make it a little easier for you to send people to it because you're going to be able to clean it up. It's like your profile page on Facebook or Instagram. You get to go
Mm,
there and you can fix it to make it uniquely yours. You're like, oh no, this is why, because they spelt it wrong, or there's a comma somewhere where there's not supposed to be, and I'll
mhm,
make it easier for your audience because then you'll have the actual link to Spotify and that you can send them to them, or you can create a QR code and have them scan the QR code, right? You have all these other options because Spotify is going to give you that because they want you to promote Spotify.
mhm.
So they're going
Now,
to give you everything. So you need to go to podcasters for Spotify or Spotify for podcasters.
mhm.
Those are the words you search, and I'll bring it up, and then you can log in, claim it, and then you'll have access to seeing why people are having issues seeing it on Spotify.
Thank you. So, how I market the podcast is if I'm speaking on a stage, I don't have time to mess with QR codes. I don't have time to mess with all that stuff. Or if I'm in a networking environment, pull out your phone. What platform do you use? Spotify, great. Now let's search on there. So I need to make sure that I can send them to Spotify and they can actually find it through my name or the podcast name. And on every other platform, it works. On iHeartRadio, it works. On Apple, it works. Everything works. But on Spotify, it hasn't been working since we launched. And I'm just like,
Wow.
how the heck do we fix this? Because now that you're telling me that we need to send everyone to Spotify every time I speak, every time I'm in public, we need to go to Spotify. Well, if I send them and they can't find it, well,
No, it will be an issue. And now I'm just looking podcasts and shows. It's Wealthy Mind.
wealthy mind.
So I have one with some other people.
Uh-huh. Not us. And then
Okay,
if you type in my name,
that's really weird. And then I
right?
go, yes, I don't like it.
Me either. You're not the only one.
Okay, so it's called Wealthy Mind. It's not Wealthy Mind Podcast.
Hmm.
So if they go Wealthy Mind, why isn't podcast? Why is yours not showing up high?
It
Okay,
doesn't.
I kind of find it, but it does take a while. Interesting. Okay. I think with you getting access to the back end, it will probably be able to clean it up a bit more
Hmm.
and make it easier to search.
Okay,
Um,
perfect.
unfortunately, the name also has competition,
Hmm.
so that could be also an issue where it's having trouble finding it on Spotify. But if you go in and you have the back end, you can. There's more SEO stuff you can
Right.
do
And that
to make
should
it
be
that.
with my name because most people are introduced to it through my name. So we have that set up on every other platform. So this is great for the listeners because they're like, oh, these are challenges that I'm going to face as a podcast host. Yeah, these are the challenges you're going to face as a podcast host. Bring it. So thank you for answering that question. I'm sure it's
Oh,
going to answer that question for a lot of people.
I'm glad I
Uh,
was able to.
I appreciate it. Now, I just wanted to cover some of the other steps of being a podcaster that people don't realize. The Zoom technology that you have to manage, awesome, great. If you're not used to that, you got to get used to it. And
Mm-hmm.
then after the podcast, I create an email introduction to my guest and for fun.
Pardon me.
And then I write the description of the episode straight after I've done it. So it's fresh in my mind and I can make it cute, creative, not so cute, logical, whatever I want it to be. And then connect everybody together and ask for my guests' links and their website and their headshot and all those things. So these are steps that are involved in my process that most people don't even think about. So that's why I believe a lot of podcasts fail after 10 episodes because number one, they're not using it strategically to grow a business. And number two, they don't realize all the effort that is involved. Now, this is where I step out. After I send the email introduction to you and Trifan, I step out and then he takes over. And oh my God, the process he has to go through. You know that process, the editing and the uploading and all the jazz. Talk about that process because that's not what I do.
So that process um, is something that you need to get down as early as possible. It's your post production process. It's okay, what do we do after I've recorded? Like for me, prior to recording, I have a process which is getting my guests. And I've been lucky that I've made connections with strategic partners
Hmm.
to funnel me guests. So my outsourcing or my outgoing finding the guests is rare that I have to do it because I have podcast bookers that I work with, um, podcast managers,
Hmm. I
and
have one of
PR.
those. I've got one. It's
There you
awesome.
go. And PR firms. I work with PR firms as well for their business. And I'm like, and it's a strategic partnership because they're getting the bonus because they know their guests can, their clients can come on my podcast. So it's one less outreach they have to do
Hmm.
because they just send me an email like, hey, this is who he is. And I go, yes. And they already have the link and they already can prep their
Hmm.
the person to be on the episode. So it's less work for me in the long run. So that's how I get my guests, and obviously previous guests, or if I go on a podcast, I always offer to the host
Hmm.
to come on my podcast. So that's like the pre thing, and then the episode recording is recording. There's a little bit beforehand, like the introduction I do when I read the guests, and then it goes into the not so fun part, right? This is the part
Let's
that
talk about the not glorious part.
yeah, the under the hood stuff,
Yeah.
maintenance, where it's okay, I've just finished the episode. I use AI tools for one of my shows, and then I have VAs to handle the other stuff.
Mm.
There's one show, my digital entrepreneur show, that's my baby. I'm going to work on that until someone says, Phil, it's time to give it up. But beforehand, I made a simple method of editing because I used to edit and it used to take me like an hour for an hour long podcast, and wasting an hour of your time editing, getting all the little ums and ahs and the pauses and this and that sounding correct takes away from the enjoyment of the episode because it feels too polished,
Hmm.
right? I'm not a journalist, so making a journalistic podcast is not mine. So, you know, hearing like someone talk and then it goes
Hmm.
in, it cuts to something else and cutting in pieces. That's not
Mm.
me. That's I those are beautiful, and the people who work on them are amazing. For me, that's a lot too much work.
It is.
There's
And I
no
love the imperfections. I
I
love not being perfect.
I want the authenticity. Like, yes, some of the long pauses I now remove. Like the AI removes it. I'm not worried about the ums and ahs and the weird ticks that my guest has because that's
Mm.
bringing authenticity to it. So the AI tool that I use just fixes the levels, making sure that the whole level's great, so that you don't have a versus. Yeah, I know it
Right.
sounds you have something sounding bad to make
Trifon's gonna be like, what the heck?
it's just this knob of just like noise. And Trafon, I apologize. You can delete that completely if you want.
Right.
But like you have the muffled sounds. It takes everything, removes background noises, makes it at least sound professional.
Oh,
Like
nice. What
like
is
all
that
the
AI tool that you use?
it's podcastle.ai. It is I lucked out finding it. It is great. It's an
Mm.
amazing tool. You can also use they've just introduced a text version editor. So you can go in and you can remove the ums and ahs if you want, or words that you don't want said in it if they made a mistake, or you can use text to edit it instead of doing audio. So yeah, it handles everything for me. The audio, it makes my audio sound great. And people, Phil, you have great sounding podcast. How do you do it? I'm like, it's all AI, man. It's all AI. If you listen to the early episodes, which I'm ashamed of, but at the same time, everybody should
No,
be everybody should be ashamed of your first episodes because it's the best
no.
and worst episode you ever do. The only
I
shame
am
I
not
have,
ashamed. I am not ashamed.
oh, I have a shame because I'm like, oh, I could have sounded so much better. Like there's little things, and I'm always going to be critical of myself.
Mm.
But for the sound quality from before to now
Hmm.
is like light and day, and that's I'm like, I wish I had it beforehand because those episodes would have been amazing. Um, so that's what I use for my editing tools. But you have Audacity. If you're an editor, you hire an audio editor, they can do amazing things. And I've been blessed to connect with some amazing editors that I'm like, hey,
Mm.
I can't edit, but this dude, he'll make your podcast sound amazing, or this person will.
Yeah.
And then after that, I uploaded into another AI tool called Cast Magic, which is a phenomenal tool that pulls out all the gold from the
Hmm.
episode. It transcribes the episode for me, so I don't have to
What?
transcribe. Yeah,
That's
I
awesome.
I go through it to make sure, like, it's AI, right? It's nothing's perfect. Go through it, make sure there's no like mess ups of spelling of people's names and all this, and or businesses, making sure everything sounds proper, reads proper. But then it does the AI content. It can come up with the title for the episode, SEO for the, like, what are the keywords. If I wanted to create an article about the episode, it can do that. It can give me the show notes, anything I want from it. And it has something called Magic Chat associated with it. It is a chat GPT on the episode. So if I
Hmm.
want to ask specific questions, let's say I have you, like, Misty, you upload this up and you're like, okay, what are the 5 ways Phil talked about monetizing a podcast? It will go through the transcript, find it, and give it to you. And now you have those that you can put as key points in the episode. Or you,
What?
yeah, it's insane. I know,
That's
right?
insane.
Like, I don't have to do it now. I don't have to listen and mark it down. Like, yes, obviously when you're podcasting, I have a little pad. I saw
Yeah,
you
yeah.
writing as well, because
Uh-huh.
those are moments that you want to maybe re-up or re-talk about, or hey, there's a question in there that I want to hear.
Hmm.
Or in the past, in the when you're doing the post-production, it's like, okay, at the 17-minute mark, usually I have timestamps. I don't write down what the person says. I have timestamps when it's key moments. And then it's like, okay, I said, if anything, when I'm editing, I go to that point, I clip it, I'm like, okay, this is a great clip for me, I like this clip, so I have the timestamp for it. But also, it's a key point in the episode. It will give you timestamps as well that
Hmm.
the AI believes is pertinent. And if you see that your timestamp's not there, you can add it in because it's your podcast, right? Those two tools have made my life uber simple, and
Yes.
minimizes the amount of time on post production.
Hmm.
But post production also includes marketing, staying in contact with your guests. Like, you send those emails out to connect Trafon with your guests so that they can take the connection to a deeper level, but
Hmm.
also sending out the email, scheduling the podcast, scheduling the content creation. So like, if you have any Instagram posts, any Instagram reels, putting those out. Unfortunately, I haven't found tools yet to do the clips. I'm working on it. I'm trying to find them. I'm playing with one right now. I don't want to announce it because I haven't. I use the tool before I announce it, and if I
Sure.
like it, then I'll announce it. If I don't,
Sure.
it just disappears. But there's a new tool that does AI clipping and takes the key points from the art podcast. So far, it looks very good. Whether it
Mm.
works is another story, and we'll see with the increase in social media traffic, right? Because I'm constantly testing, I'm constantly trying new things. What will bring more stuff to my podcast? What can I bring more value to a future client that will hire
Hmm.
me? Right?
Hmm.
I have all these tools. They hire me to take care of it. I use these tools, and I look like a genius to them. And I'm like, if you only knew how easy, simple it was. It's a lot of work still, because you have to do the uploading, you have to make sure the content's good. Does it sound like a producer is still necessary? But luckily, we have a lot of tools that can help us
Hmm.
so that it's less work on our end.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's fun.
Thank you. Oh my God. Thank you for all this information. And if we can make anything easier for other people, like I'm for it. And I know you are too, which
Oh,
is incredible. So if you guys are interested in starting a podcast or making your podcast easier, you can always contact Phil. He will share his information with you. But if
right
you
now,
want it done for you, he will charge you for that.
yes, I will. I will openly give you every knowledgeable thing I have. Knowledge is free in my regard. How I look at it,
In
knowledge
your
is
business,
in
yes.
my business, knowledge is
Yes.
free. It's on YouTube. 99% of my knowledge is from YouTube, or you can learn it from YouTube or the podcasts that teach this. If you want implementation and you rather not do that implementation, I have no problem charging you to do that implementation. It's a more joy for me. I look at it as, you're paying me to learn, because if you're a podcaster, I'm listening to your podcast. I'm learning about you
Mhm.
and what you're putting out there. So like, Misty
Mhm.
gets to interview amazing entrepreneurs and how
Mhm.
they make life better.
Yeah.
The value in that, the master class. that
Mm.
Trevon is getting, and I'm massively jealous of you, Trevon, right now. If you, I know
Oh.
you're listening, you like he like I learned this. He probably knew it long before me that getting people to pay you to handle their podcast is them paying you to learn from them. And the amount of knowledge that I have been able to glean from clients paying me to handle their podcast
Hmm.
is insane because I've learned things about the stock market I never knew because I have a podcast that talks about the stock market. I never knew about the stock market. I
Hmm.
knew my knowledge was buy low, sell high. That was my knowledge of the stock market. And that
Yeah.
Apple and Microsoft are worth a lot of money. That's it.
Hmm.
Or the stock market crashes, right?
Hmm.
The super, super basic. But now I understand how to properly invest so that I don't have to worry about my investment
Hmm.
because of my client who has a podcast on stocks. And it's like this would have taken me years and years to learn, but now I've learned it because I was editing his podcast.
Love it.
So
That's
yeah,
amazing.
if you want to connect with me to learn knowledge, Instagram is my favorite place because I like Instagram. It's pretty pictures. At the Podcast Mogul, that's where you can find me. On all social media, it's at the Podcast Mogul. However, Instagram is probably the best place you can
Okay.
find me if you're not listening to my podcast.
Thank you for keeping it simple. I appreciate that. Now, everything that we've talked about, all the ins and outs. I mean, we haven't covered everything that is involved in all of our steps of being podcasters. We're just covering the highlights, you guys. So if that doesn't encourage you to hire Phil, I don't know what is going to. Like, honestly.
I listen. If you want to go on alone, all the power to you. That's
Hmm.
you are a brave soul doing it alone.
Yeah, I won't do
Listen,
it alone.
I did it alone, and it took me a while. It took me a decade to get to the skills that I have today.
Hmm.
Hiring people, outsourcing. If you're a business owner, you know the power of outsourcing because your time is valuable.
Hmm.
You may not have the time to learn all the ins and outs of a podcast, but you are able to converse with people.
Hmm.
You just need to find someone to hire. And if you want to hire me, or you want to hire a VA, or you want to hire anyone, I highly suggest it. It's going to take you to the next level.
Hmm.
But I do suggest you have a basic understanding of each part of the process so that you know what's working and what's not working
Yeah.
for when you do decide to outsource that
Yeah.
podcast.
Now, there are things in my world that I take for granted because it's a natural fit for my world. It was a natural fit to transition into a podcast. Why? Because I'm already out there with a massive network. I'm already out there networking all the time. I'm already surrounding myself with the people that I wanted to interview. So, this is something that I take for granted that a lot of people listening maybe don't have in their sphere of influence or in their business model. It's in my business model. This is part of my empire. Like,
Mhm.
it just naturally fits. It naturally fits for me to have a pre-interview with people that want to be my guest because then I get to provide value for them and give them some pointers that are going to expedite their business process. Every single person I do a pre-interview with, it happens. And I give them free coaching advice, and they're like, "Thank you so much. This is amazing." Sweet, awesome, great, right? So it gives
Mhm.
me a chance, like slowing down that process. I don't want to go from, hey, you have a podcast, cool, I want to be on it, to straight into an interview because it doesn't serve the people. I slow that process down and I make it a three-step process. Oh, cool, you have an interview yet? Or you have a podcast? Yep. All right, let's do a pre-interview. In the pre-interview, I suss out the topic that we're going to talk about and then provide value to them. And I don't pitch them. I don't say, hey, if you want to hire me as your coach. No, I just leave it there. And then we have the interview. So what that does is that it simplifies everything in our minds too. This is what I love doing is simplifying everything. Anything I can simplify, I'm going to simplify it. So
Life
my,
is life is about simplification. Sorry for
yes,
cutting you off. Continue, continue.
no, it's good. So that's my process is simplifying it so that everyone is comfortable because not everybody is comfortable in front of a screen or an audience. I am, but they're not. And I know that. So I do a lot of prep work with people about the interview process and make sure that they don't have scare, they're not fearful, they're not scared of the process. I do so much pre-interview education that they're awesome. They're great. They're comfortable. They're like, oh, Misty explained it and she told me how to show up. She taught me how to be a good guest. Right. So this is another step in my process because I want to make sure that they get the most out of the interview and my listeners get the most out of it. So I do all of that on the front end before we
Oh,
get to the recording part of it. So there's so much involved. So you guys, like anybody that is a podcaster already and wants to simplify, reach out to Phil. If you're not a podcaster and you're looking to become one, reach out to Phil. And then, of course, if you need help building your empire, reach out to me. But there we go.
no, look, you have the empire done. I'm on the media empire, if you will. I
Yes.
handle the media. You
Yes.
handle the actual empire
Yes.
building. I just take care of the media so that they can move up to you. Once they have the media empire, they can go straight to you and build their complete huge empire, because that's what you have right now. I only have a media empire. I'm a small fish in a big pond right now, or a big fish in a small pond, depending on how you look at it. But it's
Depending.
but I love the only reason I don't do the pre-interview
Hmm.
is because I love finding out about the
Hmm.
person. I'm coming from the hobbyist podcast area and not the business area, right? You're coming
Gotcha.
from the business area, so you understand not everybody's going to be a fit for the podcast. I make that
Mhm.
decision at the end of the episode. If I'm like, this
Oh,
episode is
ah,
butts, I have the right to not release it, right? Because
right.
that's one of the qualifications to come on. It's I have the right to release or not release the episodes.
See, I don't want
So
to waste my time like that.
I don't mind, because I when I launched my this podcast, I was still working for a corporate job. From 9 to 5, I was corporate, and then from 5:30 to 10, I was podcaster Phil.
Okay.
So I didn't look at it podcasting as a business
Okay.
operation. I was looking at it to learn how I can become a business owner. And I
Hmm.
wasn't thinking of the podcast as part of my business
Hmm.
until someone says, "Hey, can I pay you to do my podcast?" And I'm like, "Wait, what?" I'm still in the early stages of learning. What? And then I transitioned to using the podcast as a lead magnet to either interview my potential clients,
Hmm.
as or to people listen to the episode and they're like, I want that service. So I love what you're doing. Like, that's great because you value your time. I apparently don't value my time. That's why I just record as many episodes as possible. But I love learning so much. So I look at it like school,
Sure.
which is a difference because I'm still early in my career as an entrepreneur, and learning so much and making those connections, building my black book of connections in the
Hmm.
entrepreneurial
Hmm.
world, where you're like
Hmm.
light years ahead of me. Eventually, I probably have pre-interviews when I start, like, my time is more constrained. Uh,
Sure.
but at this moment, I have the time. I have Tuesday and Wednesdays, which I do my interviews on. So, or is it Tuesday, Wednesday, Wednesday, Thursday? One of those two. Wednesdays, I know for sure. Wednesdays are 100% interview day.
Hmm.
Is Tuesdays and Thursdays are the alternate days, depending on if a guest can do it. But like I said, I have the time available, so I interview as many people as I can.
Love it. And it fits your expertise. It makes sense that you have a different methodology with interviewing people and all the things. It fits for you, and what I do fits for me. And that's what people have to find for themselves. What works for your world, what works for your life, what works for your business. So I know that, oh my God, I usually only do 30-minute
I'm
episodes,
sorry. I'm sorry. I
but
just never shut up.
but but this was so important to get this information out to the public. So, yes, we went over, guys. I know you're fine with it because this is awesome, juicy information. So,
It's a one-off. I promise. The next time I'll be 10 minutes on. I'll be only 10 minutes.
that's going to be your homework. Okay, next time, how do I do 30 minutes with Misty?
While we're writing down 30 minutes with Misty episode. Here we go. Here we go. So people can see it. Boom.
Yes,
I need to learn how to
yes.
do it 30 minutes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time and thank you for your wisdom, your insight, your knowledge, and just being a fun guest. Like, I appreciate it.
Misty, thank you so much for all those kind compliments. Um, this was a blast. One of the more fun episodes I was a guest on. And
Yay.
I apologize to your audience that they had to listen to me for longer than 30 minutes. And Trevon, I'm sorry that you have to do longer editing. But I hope you get a lot of good out of the episode and the knowledge.
Yeah.
I know how powerful it is to listen back to episodes
Mm-hmm.
of the clients you have. So I want to
Yes.
thank you, Misty. This was an absolute pleasure and a delight.
Wonderful. Well, until next time, have a wonderful week, wonderful weekend, and we'll see you again.
Thank you for tuning in to the Wealthy Mind podcast. Please be sure to download the Wealthy Mind app today and make sure to support your local Dress for Success.